All right, let's get going. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us for this month's webinar, Centering Servingness, titled What's the Buzz? Servingness, Humanities, and Working with Latinx Students and Our Communities. I'm Judy Marquez-Quillama, Associate Vice Provost for Faculty Development here at the U of A, and I'm excited to welcome you on behalf of Faculty Affairs and HSI Initiatives. As it's been our tradition, today's panelists will engage with the notion of servingness, particularly when considering partnerships with local communities, local organizations, and local students. Servingness, a concept developed by Dr. Gina Garcia, captures the ways in which faculty and staff who engage in efforts that honor the cultures and lived experiences of Latinx, Black, Indigenous, and underrepresented students and communities. We begin today by respectfully acknowledging that the University of Arizona is on the land and territories of Indigenous peoples. Today, Arizona is home to 22 federally recognized tribes, with Tucson being home to the Orem and the Yaqui. Committed to diversity and inclusion, the university strives to build sustainable relationships with sovereign Native nations and Indigenous communities through education offerings, partnerships, and community service. As I've shared before, the goals of our webinar series are threefold. By spotlighting current scholarship, current outreach efforts, we acknowledge examples of the rich ways in which servingness is enacted by our faculty, our staff, and in partnership with communities. We invite others, both on campus and nationally, to learn about these efforts, and we build knowledge. Each month, we address the question, what next steps are needed to build institutional capacity around HSI servingness? And it's my honor to introduce you to Dr. Ana Cornhide, who will moderate the panel today. She is an associate professor of practice and director of critical service learning and community outreach within the Department of Spanish and Portuguese. Her outreach work promotes development through arts and humanities to serve as means of overcoming social barriers. Her research is firmly situated in contemporary culture and performance studies with a strong commitment to the examination of race and ethnicity and their interchange with gender and sexuality studies. For the past years, her central focal point for her research has been cultural politics of migration and the figure of migrant as a site of cross-cultural dialogue, which places her interest in a larger and broader scale, that of transatlantic border studies and theories of globalization. She has developed a critical service learning program that involves integrating experiential opportunities for students in the department to focus on critical service learning, social entrepreneurship, leadership, and community-based projects and outreach with many of the amazing folks that you see here today. Since the beginning of the program in fall of 2014, partnerships have been established with more than 50 organizations in the fields of education, human rights, law, public health, counseling, and diplomacy. She's been recognized for her outstanding teaching as the 2017 recipient of the College of Humanities Distinguished Teaching Award, and in 2016 was honored with the Richard Reese Diversity Leadership Faculty Award. So she is joined today by 4 outstanding panelists and community partners: Ismelda Esquer, who serves as the program manager at the Women's Leadership and Wellness Center with the YMCA of Southern Arizona; Maria Federico-Brummer, who is the director of TUSD's Mexican American Student Services, Sean Goslar, who serves as the Regional Program Manager of Immigration Services with Chicanos for Causa, and Claudia Jasso, who is the Chief Development Officer with Amistades Incorporated. So please help me welcome all of our panelists, and I will turn it over to Ana at this point.
Thank you, Judy, for the warm introduction and for inviting me to participate in this series. And thank you to the HSI initiatives for expanding and deepening the conversations about what it means to serve in the many communities in this region. Welcome everyone to this conversation about the role of critical service learning opportunities in transformative engagement for students and communities. As Judy said, my name is Ana Cornhide, and I am the director of the Critical Service Learning and Community Outreach at the Department of Spanish and Portuguese. And this is a conversation with 4 of our partners in the program: Ismelda, Claudia, Maria, Sean. I want to thank you for the ways you help our students to develop responsible and impactful relationships. You teach them ways of engaging with one another to build stronger and more empowered communities. To begin our conversation together, would you please share with us a little bit about you, a brief description of your organization, its programs, and the communities it serves?
I can go first. Thank you, Ana. And thank you for the invitation. It's wonderful to be here. My name is Claudia Jasso. I work for Amistades and I am their Chief Development Officer. Amistades is a grassroots Latino-led, Latino-serving organization. We engage Mexican familias in programs that promote youth development, equity, and cultural enrichment. And through these programs, we address many things, including acculturation stress, historical trauma, dehumanization, and racism. I'm a third-generation Chicana from San Antonio, Texas. Thank you again for inviting me to be here.
Welcome, Claudia. Imelda?
Yes, good afternoon and thank you for the invitation. It's my pleasure to be here. And my name is Ismelda Esquer. I work at the YMCA of Southern Arizona. I am the program manager of the Women Leadership and Wellness Center. What can I say about this partnership with Dr. Cornhide, with the Department of University of Arizona, is me being undocumented for many, many years. And my first language is Spanish. And working in my department, we have the Latina Leadership Institute department. So I can understand very well the same struggle that our participants and the student from that Dr. Cornhide sent us to work with us. So we can create a meaningful relationship because we share the same struggles and have the same interests, and also the same, we can share a lot of meaningful ideas that we can grow together and we can achieve together. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you, Melda. Welcome. Sean?
Hello. Thank you. Yes, also thank you so much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. So I actually did my undergrad and I was in the Spanish department during my undergrad. One of my majors was Spanish. And then I went on to get my master's in public administration also from the U of A. So double Wildcat. Before that, I worked at a few congressional offices doing casework. I was fortunate enough to do some casework. Congressional office and got me kind of my feet wet in the immigration world. And then I moved on to work over at the nonprofit sector. I started at Catholic Community Services, working under a grant that served under the Office of Violence Against Women from the Department of Justice. We had a legal assistance for victims grant, which allowed us to serve victims of domestic violence and sexual assault in immigration matters, primarily U visas for victims of crime and VAWA eligible recipients, which is the Violence Against Women Act, to help them navigate that system. I had done a lot of immigration work, so then I ended up, excuse me, moving over to Chicanos por la Causa, where I got hired to create the program here in Tucson. CPLC had an immigration department in the Somerton, Yuma area for about 30 years. But had not created a department here in Tucson. So they decided that there was enough need and demand in the area. So they created this, they opened this position, and then I was fortunate enough to be hired to create that program. So I've been here since April of 2019, and now oversee actually all immigration operations. So we're here in Tucson, we're in Yuma, Somerton, and we're in Nogales, hopefully moving into the West Valley soon, and serving hopefully the rest of Southern Arizona as well. We're kind of working on that expansion. And then, yes, I mean, obviously super critical to that is the partnership, because we get amazing students. That's kind of part of how I got my start through some of these programs and the partnership. Thank you to Dr. Cornhide. And now we have a wonderful relationship where we get several students that are super interested in learning more about the immigration process, learning just what our clientele serves, learning more about their own backgrounds and processes and what they've been through and their families have been through. But we'll talk about that a little bit more ahead. But yes, thank you again.
Thank you, Sean. Welcome. And last but not least, Maria.
Hello, everyone. I'm Maria Federico-Brummer. Like Ana had said before, that I am director for Mexican American Student Services in Tucson Unified. Tucson Unified is the second largest school district in the state of Arizona, the largest in Southern Arizona. And we are consistently, working with students, probably like 28,029 Latinx Mexican American identified students in the K-12 or pre-K-12 level. We also in Tucson Unified have been instrumental in creating a culturally responsive pedagogy and teaching program, our culturally responsive pedagogy and instruction department, which is, the foundation comes from Mexican American Studies, which I was an educator in that program for many years. And I think we have one of our attendees is one of our former students. I'm very proud of them too. Right now, I also am wearing another hat as a scholar. I am a graduate student of the PhD program in Mexican American Studies on top of that. But just we serve families across the district and throughout the community. We are a resource to connect our families and our students to folks in this room, some of our amazing community resources that consistently are focusing on advocacy at several different levels and strong resources for all of us. So thank you all, and appreciation and honor to be able to be one of the panelists here.
Thank you, Maria, and welcome. My first question for you all is, you are responsive and responsible stakeholders to the needs of the communities that your organization serves. How do your principles and practices foster equity and reciprocity? For example, Claudia and Ismelda, I know your participants are involved in the selection and the creation of your programming. Could you please elaborate?
Who wants to go first? Me?
I would be happy to go first too. Ismelda, you can too.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, Claudia.
Okay. So our agency's philosophy is to honor the inherent knowledge of the communities that we serve. And when I say that, in theory, you may hear one thing, and in practice, I want to share a little bit about what that means. In practice, that means that our approach to community engagement is always must be grassroots, no exception. That means bottom up engagement, not top down. What that means is we are lifting the voices of the community. We're working with them, boots on the ground. We are not in a white tower telling people from the community what they need to do. They know what they need to do. Our job is to help them do that. And so we acknowledge their inherent strengths and their knowledge base. And the second thing is that, again, we lift their voices. We never do anything that doesn't include engaging them in a participatory action approach. So we don't develop programs, we don't develop initiatives, we don't make major moves, quite frankly, without listening to our community first. So when we do that, that builds trust and it builds an authenticity that isn't there sometimes when other organizations don't take the steps and intentionally try to do that with our community. So if it isn't part of a process like this, we don't do it. It's what we call for them and by them. And then there's equity in that. There's a relationship and an exchange.
Thank you, Claudia. Ismelda?
Exactly what Claudia said. She vocalized exactly what I want to say. So we do it the same way. So how can we use the excellence in the way that we respond to the needs of the community? First of all, we identify the disparities, and then we adopt the strategies to reduce those disparities. And how we do that? By hearing the voices of the participants. They let us know how to guide our work. And we ask, what do you need to move from point A to point B? And how can I support you? So we are hearing their voices and we incorporate their ideas and we identify their needs in our learning centers. One example can be childcare. So many times the participants say that I cannot attend the classes because I don't have anyone who take care of my child. If I attend classes, I don't know how to do it. So we say, just bring your children. We have a space for your children. We have toys, we have snacks, we have a volunteer who can watch your children while you're learning. And that experience for me is providing equity. Even the childcare is a big issue in our society. So we allow our participants to bring their children. So by giving value to the authentic voices of the community, we are building community, we are building power and capacity to address the issues that are impacting our community. Another example can be the GED. Recently, we opened the GED Mentoring Center. So because we provide some classes during Saturday morning we have a partnership with the Pima Community College, and we provide the classes, like I say, every Saturday morning, but I thought it's not enough, 3 hours having the lesson in a group setting. So how can we identify other ways to meet the needs of the participants? So Dr. Cornhide, she sent me an excellent intern, and together we identify the needs of the participants. What else do you need to achieve your GED certification? So we identify the issues: childcare, transportation, language barriers, and I can go on and on and on. So we develop a learning center where we met all the needs of the participants mentioned. So we hear their voices and we hear from them. It's from them to us, not from us to them. So it's exactly what Claudia said.
Thank you, Melda. Maria, do you want to pick on that?
So we also have several opportunities for our TUSD, our district families, to engage, and it's based on their needs. So their needs and driven by what they feel, whether it's intervention or enrichment. So we have several opportunities for families to engage, and one of them is our parent advisory. And so that's just been one vehicle in which our Mexican American Latinx parents are coming together monthly and advising our district and our leadership in terms of what needs to happen. And so that comes from bringing a childcare or making environments virtual to respond to some of the different needs that our families have, and just giving the opportunity for them to be advocates in their children's education. And that comes with an entire holistic approach to being an asset-based entity for families to really get the services, the wraparound services that they need from a public school system that isn't something that should be an outside foreign agent or organization to them, but it's something that should be theirs and they have ownership of. And so that's where we come from. And I think our colleagues already spoke a lot about some of the other socio-emotional issues too. We'll get into that, but thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Sean, do you want to add something?
I mean, I guess quickly, I think some of the next questions is what I really want to talk about, because I think who we heard from is really who's doing more of that work. I mean, unfortunately, we don't really choose our clientele, right? But we are trying to do our best to educate folks out there, right? So there's basically two big portions of our program: providing legal assistance in the immigration world and the immigrant empowerment project. And so the Immigrant Empowerment Project is focused on helping kind of what you all do, and that's what we're trying to build coalitions to make sure that we're responsive to the needs of the immigrants in our community. On the front of the immigration assistance side, there's basically really, obviously, you're going to come here so that we can help you with your application, because there's one of two people in this world that can help you with your legal representation. Obviously, an immigration attorney that is part of a state bar and is in good standing, or you can come to an accredited organization that's accredited by the Department of Justice, like Chicanos por la Causa is, and each one of us has an accreditation through the Department of Justice to be able to be your legal representative in immigration matters. So this is important because a lot of our community is victim to what we call notario fraud, because everybody knows that for the Hispanic community, notarios are typically an attorney that can, they look at, review legal documents and stuff like that. Here, a notary public is simply somebody that is a witness to a signature ultimately. So those are big differences, and there's no credentials and there's no accountability for them. So a big part of what we do is just educating folks out there about who they should come to. And then we're hoping to just reach more. Obviously, we have a really good reach within the Hispanic community and the Latino community and the Chicano community, but we really want to also make sure that the refugee community that's in town, because luckily we are a largely refugee, a lot of refugees come to Pima County. We want to make sure that they know that we exist for them, because we want to make sure that we're welcoming all immigrants and that we're hopefully fostering that equity across the board in all the communities that we serve, and so that people don't feel left out.
Thank you, Sean. And the second question, and I'm going to start with you, since you expressed your interest in starting, is well, many people might not realize that in the Department of Spanish and Portuguese, the makeup of the student population is 70% Latinx and Hispanic, 50% first generation going to college. What is the value added of having these students participating in your programs, as well as the challenges?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I think that something I mentioned when we were talking earlier was I like to have the students come here because I learn so much from the students, their backgrounds. They get to learn a lot about what the actual process is, maybe what some of their family members went through, maybe if some of them for them personally. We've had DACA students come through. We've had students that are in the green card process, or they're bringing a family member, or their parents are in the process of doing their legal paperwork, and they get to understand kind of the complexity of the entire system. And then they share some of their experiences, right? And then the really cool thing that I would say is like I get reminded of why I like to do what I do, because I remember like looking at those declarations and stuff for people that are pouring their heart out into a declaration about why they should stay in this country, or how they were victimized or something like that. And then, that they're survivors and everything that they went through, and that, the students get to maybe experience something they had never experienced, and understand the backgrounds of a lot of our clients, which is incredibly important to, I think, all of us, to get some humility, but also to just understand just the realities of a lot of what our community faces. And I think that that's great for a lot of our students to come through and understand just what the realities are of a lot of what their fellow students, family members, community members went through, and then just get that firsthand experience.
Thank you, Sean. Maria?
So we're relatively new to having what we call our interns from this department, and it's been an amazing bridge of mentoring. It's been very reciprocal in the sense that the students that we've had in the program all come with this, expertise in some way. We're able to capitalize on that to bring out the best possible potential relationship building for our students and our parents too. Our parents have been very appreciative of the interaction of having someone from the university coming and engaging with their child. It doesn't seem that it's someplace far off and foreign anymore. You have someone who looks like them, who has a familial experience very much like them, and who can speak to different backgrounds that our students are have, and they're hoping to have those same kind of ambitions that each one of our interns have come in through with. And again, looking at this responsibility, each and every one of them come in with a sense of responsibility to the community, to the classroom, to the student that they're engaging with. And that's something that you can't have just anyone come in and build that relationship and that trust and build that respect. So that's something that is a strength. It's a strength. We're building on what Yoso calls the community cultural well. And each, they have this navigational capital, they have social capital, they have cultural capital. They come with all of these entities, and we're able to utilize them in the K-12 level. I think one of the challenges is that, as a school district, we don't have enough teachers who come from the backgrounds of our students. We're 60% Mexican American, Latinx, and then our teaching population is 60% European American. So we have to flip that. And so I think one of the challenges is looking at each one of the candidates and saying, can you be a teacher? Trying to mentor them to become one of those educators. Of course, they have different goals, and that's fine. And getting into higher education, etc. But we want to keep them. I think that's been something that we're working on. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Claudia?
Thank you. Yeah, before I answer directly the question, I want to acknowledge that as an agency, we don't use the term Hispanic because it represents colonization and strips us from our indigenous roots. And we didn't make this up. This comes directly from the community that we serve. So this is the voice of the community that we are amplifying. So all due respect, we just do not use Hispanic. So to answer your question directly, student participation and our collaboration is of great value to the agency. We always, like Sean said, we've always got something to learn from youth in their space and in their mindsets. And so we're grateful for that. We also feel a great sense of certainty when youth come in and they are feeling, and I'm just going to say it, they're feeling like the other, they're feeling like they're in this big system, this educational system that's been acknowledged as a system of oppression, and they're not like the dominant group of individuals in that system. And so when they come, they don't just learn their technical skills, they don't learn only about our agency's philosophy and our practices, but they through the work build a stronger sense of self. They learn about their cultural values. They start to look to take pride in their heritage, and they are better equipped to move into that professional sector once they finish school and they graduate. So that's important for us, because we all know that there is no protection, and this is what they've been taught. There's no protection in the whiteness from racism. That it doesn't happen. So we have to build a stronger sense of self for them and help them with that, because very often these students, instead of acculturating, end up assimilating, which is detrimental to them. So it's not just in practice what they're learning and what they're doing and the exchange between us. It's really how we are shaping them and helping them as individuals and future professionals.
Thank you, Claudia. Imelda, do you want to add something?
Yes, I would like everyone say I agree with everyone else what they share, but so the value is for me is when your student come to our programs and they immediately feel the empathy for our participants because they share the same culture. They know exactly how it is and the challenges that they face. And also when they come here, they see their own mother, the same struggle that their own mother faces, their own tias or sisters, and they immediately feel the empathy and they want to work with the participants. And they come for professional interest, but they stay many semesters, not only complete the 45 hours internship program, they stay much longer because that connection that they and the bonds that they grow when they are here. So I think that is very important for me.
Thank you, Melda. And I'm just gonna read the third question, and I'm gonna open the floor to all of you to answer as you please. The University of Arizona prides itself as a land-grant and Hispanic serving institution. In order to have more equitable and reciprocal relationships with the communities it is meant to serve, are there ways that the university may strengthen, improve collaboration with community organizations such as yours?
I would say continue to create platforms for discussions like this. These are very important connections to make between the university and the community-based organizations that are working in partnership with you. I would also just say thank you for including us in the conversation. Often Latinos and Indigenous people are left out of the conversations about racial equity. And even though this is about the partnership and what we're doing together, it's also about racial equity. I mean, it is. So thank you for including us, because we are left out very, very often of the conversation.
Thank you, Claudia. Somebody else? Maria, Sean, Imelda?
I can say that what I can say is some of the most powerful teaching and learning experiences can come from the challenges of working with a community organization on issues that matter to the community itself. It is the sense of purpose understanding the mission of both sides, not only from the university, but also for our organization, and how can we achieve mutual benefit. And it's cultivating trust and respect both sides.
Thank you, Imelda.
So, for our K-12 setting, this partnership that we have with the department is sort of an example that we can follow. And so one way would be adopting one of our high schools, or adopting the school and different departments and different entities. And that's exactly what the Spanish and Portuguese department has done with Pueblo High School. And so we're at initial stages there, but this is an investment in the humanities and creating those bridges again to university directly from the high school setting. And then maybe we can go into the feeders for the middle schools, and then going into the elementaries from there. So there's great potential in building these community pathways for our families and for our students, and looking at strengths. And so following an asset-based approach, I think the university can look, in our community, look into our classroom spaces and see the potential from each and every one of our students, and having those engagements and bringing this entity, this institution, into their own settings, and then bringing them back. So an example is just this past weekend, we collaborated with the Office of Early Academic Outreach, the College Academy for Parents. We had 35 families on campus, and our interns were there as ambassadors and conducted the college tours for our families. And it was the first time for many of them who they've never been at the U of A for anything. And so that's where we're heading to get as many engagements like that going.
Thank you, Maria. Sean?
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of prompted by, and I think we're gonna answer the question later, but it kind of prompted something about the various backgrounds from our students, right? And how can we improve the accessibility for some of this? And the reality is, it is challenging, because it is probably easier for those that are a little more well off economically to be able to do an internship, because they have the ability and to just do this, right? Like we talked that we're all in a privileged place, that we have a lot of knowledge, we have our employment and whatever, but a lot of our students, they're like, you know what, an internship is just not real reality for me, because I have to go work, right? I'm barely making ends meet and stuff. And so this is not something that I can necessarily do. And I think that we all need to figure out a better mindset and how we can make this a better reality for a lot of people to participate in this stuff, because obviously I think it's incredibly important. And I think there's a ton of value to it. But I think we often don't answer the question, how realistic is it for some students to actually access some of this stuff?
Thank you. I don't know if we have time for another question, Judy, or do you want to move to the Q&A?
We do. We have about 7 more minutes for the panelists. Keep going, Anna.
Perfect. So, well, thank you so much for all of this knowledge. I think this is very enlightening conversation. I have one more question, just based on everything you are saying. You're mentioning a lot the word access, and you're also mentioning the word advocacy. So I'm gonna just return it back to the institution. Advocacy is an important part of all of your programs. And can you please elaborate on the hows and the whys? And also, most importantly, are there ways that the university can facilitate access for that advocacy work? Claudia, I see that you unmuted yourself.
Sure, I can. I would just reiterate the importance of acknowledging and then addressing the fact that the education is one of the systems that may not be as friendly isn't as friendly to people of color, and we're talking about Latinos here, as we would like. So anything that can be done to continue to acknowledge and address that and move the conversation forward, I think would be very, very helpful. And I certainly don't have the answers, but I can tell you that if there are steps taken, then and there are communities working together, that there will be some great ideas moving forward. So advocacy is one thing, but you've got to determine what the root cause is. And if the root cause is a system of oppression, perceived or in fact it is, or one or the other or both, it really doesn't matter. It has to be acknowledged and then addressed by the community. And I want to say there's a really big difference between strategic communication and narrative change. And I think what we're talking about here is a change in discourse. And if communities aren't engaged in this conversation, if first and foremost this isn't acknowledged, then it's very challenging and not likely to happen. So I think that if steps are taken in a strategic and honest, authentic way, that there can be change. But it can't always be from or coming from the CBOs, community-based organizations. It needs to come authentically from, in this case, the universities and the people in the leadership positions who get to make decisions.
Thank you, Claudia. Maria, Sean, Imelda.
Well, I wanted to jump off of Sean's, accessibility issue and the reality of our students and their lives and what those struggles that they have as college students. So putting your money where your mouth is cliche, but as partnering institutions, so far we've been able to hire some of our interns for paid positions, because they are amazing and the work that they do is challenging, and they are facing a lot of the conditions that are fostering inequities in our school district head on. And so they're doing the equity work that our equity department's supposed to be doing. And so we're hiring them. But at the university institutional level, like, we can have paid internships. That's a possibility. And it should be, it shouldn't be a struggle for our departments. It should be something that if we're this HSI, then this is where we're going to invest in.
Thank you, Maria. Sean?
Yeah, I mean, fully agree. I don't know. I mean, there's things that you can, potentially explore, right? Like, do we match some sort of grant or something, where it's like, hey, organization pays a part and university pays a part. I don't know. I think we do need to start these conversations about how we make it a little more equitable for our students, right? To access some of this stuff. But then on the advocacy side, just kind of getting into that. So we don't do as much advocacy like on the lobbying front, like we do as an organization. We do have a 501c4 dedicated to advocacy. We have a head of advocacy that we do sign on to, for example, or as a program, we will often sign on to stuff like it's in the Federal Register. So if there's a rule change or a policy change that they're going to propose in the Federal Register, these are all comments that the federal government has to read if there's an immigration policy. Obviously, that's our focus. And that I highly encourage people, to actually go out there and submit a comment, because they have to read these, and there's strength in numbers. And a lot of times I see organizations and out there flirting all this stuff, but then I say, okay, well, here's the Federal Register. Is anybody going to comment? And then there's crickets, right? And so I'm like, this is a real tangible thing that you can do. So go ahead and put your money where your mouth is, right? I mean, your mouth. So like, do the things that we can actually do, not just the advocacy of saying like, we need to change the conversation. That's incredibly important. But when there's real things that we can tangibly change, that we actually do a lot of those things, meaning that so something as simple as commenting on the Federal Register when those things come out, right? Or, getting involved in the political process and getting signatures, or voting on a prop, or getting everybody registered to vote, like things that we can really like volunteer and get people registered to vote, whatever. That I think is where we can really do like advocacies in kind of on the ground, right? And so also just make sure that people get involved and actually do some stuff out there and submit those comments and get out there and get involved.
Thank you, Sean. Imelda?
I again fully agreed with all the comment that my partners say. I would like also I think Maria say or Sean say, how can we advocate for applying for grants so the intern can have like a partnership instead of, because the value and the expertise that they bring to the department, to our organization is incredible. And I think having grant funding to pay will be great. So that maybe we can have another conversation. How can we explore those options?
Thank you. Thank you to all of you for sharing all of this knowledge and information, and also pathways moving forward. Judy, do you want to facilitate Q&A?
Sure, this was fantastic. Monique and I were texting on the side saying, this is such a good conversation. We're trying to capture all of it. We do have a couple of questions that have come in. I'm going to go ahead and invite the folks who posed questions to unmute. And so let me find you, Jaya, I believe, right? And I don't see you on here anymore. Oh, Monique already did it. Okay, go ahead. You should be able to join in. Hi. And pose a question.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so as Sean mentioned, Latino students have diverse backgrounds, I believe. Some students are, one key difference that I see is that some students are first generation college students, like from working class background, and some are continuing generation students from more like middle class background. And I see that their needs and challenges are different. And would you have any advice for like someone who work with students at the university, for me, like an instructor, what would be the best way to deal with this basically intersectionality, like their different needs and challenges, and yeah.
I'd be happy to contribute. That's a really important question, and thank you for asking it. And I can speak to you about our perspective and our experience. What we prioritize doing is finding out and learning the cultural background of the individuals that we work with. And we also work with newly immigrated, undocumented individuals, first, second, third generation. And let me tell you, they're all very different. They all come with their own nuances. So your first step is acknowledging that. And I think that you're there. And your second step is just learning as much as you can about the differences, at every vantage point that you have with these individuals, and then taking that into consideration when you're talking to them and working with them. And that's very different for every individual. So I can't really advise as to how to do that. But I think you're definitely taking the right steps in first acknowledging and then with the intent of doing a good job in communicating in a way that is authentic and relevant for those individuals.
Thank you.
Sure.
And Anna, I know you have great longevity, right, with these types of initiatives. So please feel free to answer questions too. But for anybody else, does anybody else want to jump in on that particular question?
I think Ismelda was going to answer.
Yes, for me, for example, sometimes we need to ask very sensitive questions in order for canalize the participants to the right resources. And sometimes they say, I want to be a social worker. And then it's very difficult for me to ask, do you have a social security number? Because that's one of the first things that you need to, when you complete your application. So you need to have a social security number. So how can I avoid to assume if they are undocumented or not? So that is a very difficult question. So, but when we create this space of empathy and safety, we don't need to ask those questions because they say right away, right? And then identifying the struggles, and then because we need to have the full idea of the background of the participants, so that way we can re-traumatize the participants, like providing some kind of resources that doesn't apply to them because the circumstances that they face. So I think once we create that space of empathy, trust in our environment and our institution, then we can canalize the participants to the right resources, and then we can advocate so that different intersection that they face. So doesn't mean that they cannot move forward, just we need to identify the right resources for them.
It's a great advice. Thank you.
And I would just echo everything that Claudia and Ismelda has said, right? It would be advocate, support, and empower. And each person really has different needs that are not just related to class, but other elements of their cultural background.
Yeah.
Thank you for your question.
Thank you.
I want to be sure to direct folks' attention to the chat, because there was some information put in there about initiatives for paid internships. And I know that was part of the conversation. So there's a resource that was added to the chat. And then Alexandra, you had a question. Would you like to unmute and ask?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, thank you so much for today's panel. This is great. My name is Alexandra and I'm a new TRIO SSS director. And I was wondering, we're working on branding right now, and we want to work on an all-inclusive sort of identity. And we are having a hard time because a lot of our students, and this is maybe to Claudia or any of the other panelists, but we're working on an all-inclusive identity that can contain the identities of people that identify as Hispanic, Latino, Latina, Latine, Latinx. Like we have so many of these different rótulos, right? And I'm wondering, how do we create an all-inclusive identity when all of our students identify in different ways? I personally don't identify as Hispanic because I know what the background and the political nature of it was. However, I know that a lot of Southern Arizona Tios, Tias, Latinos, Latinas do. So I'm wondering, how do we do it in terms of marketing, brochures, pamphlets, and things like that? I want to get your take on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Alejandra. My first question would be, do you have any constraints or within the university about what language or what phrases you can use based on funding, federal fund? It's really the federal government that created the term many decades ago as part of the US Census. What are your constraints is the first question, because as much as you want to create something that is inclusive and for the community, do you have a barrier is my question to you.
So that's a great question. I have no idea. To be honest, I have come back from, I'm Chilena and I'm from Chile. So I know that we have a completely different voice there in Chile. Here in the United States, when I get into TRIO, I know that TRIO has, I don't know what TRIO constraints are. I don't think there are any, to be honest, but I know that the university might, where we work under another program that is exclusive to STEM majors. So maybe the institution might have them. I don't know. I think it's something that we're sort of talking about, but I wanted to get your take on it, because if there are any constraints, how would I do it? Let's just say that.
I would just say, do your homework, figure it out so that you know what you're dealing with. And then let's say you didn't have any of that as a barrier, then my advice based on experience within our organization and within the community that we work with is talk to as many people as you can, reach some kind of consensus, and don't be afraid to take a position. As long as your position is defensible, whether it's research or data as a result of the research or voice, and the qualitative information is just as important as the quantitative. Don't ever dismiss the qualitative as much as maybe an academic setting may encourage you to. Make sure it's defensible, take a position, and then move forward. We took a position that we were not going to use Hispanic. We don't use Latinx either. We think that is a bastardization of the Spanish language. That is our position, and it's defensible. And so you just have to take a position, move forward, make sure it's defensible, and all you can do is test it, test, evaluate, and see how it goes.
Yeah, I find sometimes that our students don't know the background as to certain words. I believe that words create our reality. And so I'm always there to educate them, and then they can go ahead and say, okay, then I identify this way or that way. Our first point was maybe to, I don't know, pull out a survey and see how students would like to identify. The only thing is that I always wonder, you know, if you were given the information and the documentation as to the origin of certain words, would you still identify that way, knowing that there was these different kinds of origins, right? So yeah, I thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Sounds like you're on the right track. So be brave and
thank you.
Don't be unafraid.
Thank you.
Sure.
And then Ismelda, did you have something?
No.
Okay. I just want to reiterate, especially community organizations, that it has to be bilingual, whatever you're sending out. If you really want to engage with community members from Spanish-speaking, origin countries, and might be first generation, then it has to be bilingual. I have so many flyers come through our department from amazing events happening, and they're only in English. And so I'll send them back. I won't send them out to all of our families until they're bilingual.
I appreciate that. And I appreciate your comment, Maria, because that's one of the first things that I noticed about that. So yeah, thank you.
I can add a little bit about, but it maybe not related to what Alejandra Diaz asked, but reinforcing what Maria said, it has to be bilingual. So domestic violence is a big issue. It's a public issue, and not only in Tucson, Arizona, and the whole world. So that statistic is quite similar. 1 in 3 women are survivors of domestic violence or have faced domestic violence. So we are providing the only training in Spanish for domestic violence survivors. So it has to be bilingual. We have to provide the trainings and the information in their own languages. So yeah, it has to be bilingual, but also it has to be in Spanish, because I can say we are the only organization who are providing those services and that information in their own language.
Thank you.
Thank you for such a great question. Usually the last question I ask has to do with how do we continue to build institutional capacity around our HSI designation. But I think, you know, we need to nuance that a little bit. And I wonder if you all can speak to, I imagine, right? You probably get contacted by multiple people in the university saying, can we partner? We have some ideas. Because on our end, we're thinking, oh, one way to build institutional capacity is to partner with our incredible community members and organizations. But what is the most culturally affirming, responsive, respectful way to reach out, right? So that you are not bombarded on a regular basis with requests, because we don't want to over invite ourselves either. So what should those requests look like? What should that outreach look like, so that it feels authentic in the ways that Anna mentioned?
I can say at the very beginning, we start this conversation and Claudia say this, and I validate what Claudia say. So we need, the method is from the community to us, not to us to the community. So I think that the humble way to start the partnership is willing to validate the voices of the community and gain that learning from them, because any research or theoretical aspect are empty if it doesn't include the voice of the community. Just acknowledging that the community are the best way to achieve equity. So there, we need to consider their voices. That's, for me, the number one aspect.
I would add that engagement should happen year-round. We find that as an organization, we are bombarded with requests around holidays and Hispanic Heritage Month. We find those disingenuous at best, and we definitely don't want to participate in anything that looks or feels like tokenism. So I would just say that if there's engagement on any level with community-based organizations, make sure that it's year-round and sustainable and not based on a cultural holiday or any form of tokenism or appropriation.
Sean or Maria, is there anything else that you want to jump in and add? I know that these messages came throughout the hour, but I think it's worth repeating, right? It's worth saying again. So please know that we appreciate you all so much. But I'm going to turn it over to Anna to do any type of closing that you might want to do, with my sincerest gratitude to all of you. So Anna.
Well, I'm just gonna iterate how thankful I am that you, of course, joined me in this conversation. And also I want to say thank you to Judy, who approached me a year ago to just talk about my program. Of course, my program is made of students and all of these organizations, but also you as leaders and mentors of our students. So I just want to, again, second that thank you. And I want to tell the audience, thank you for joining us in this timely and important conversation. And I hope you have a wonderful afternoon and evening.